Thank you, Pope Francis, for your life of service, humility, and deep compassion. You led with kindness, broke barriers with love, and reminded the world of the power of mercy and hope. Your legacy of faith, justice, and unity will live on in the hearts of millions. May you rest in eternal peace and grace. What would you do if a late-night passenger pulled a gun on you, demanding your money and phone? Imagine the adrenaline surging through your veins, the cold sweat trickling down your spine as you grip the steering wheel, your heart pounding like a war drum in your chest. Meet Samantha Carter, a former Marine Corps sergeant turned Lyft driver in the gritty streets of Detroit, whose life is about to collide with a haunting shadow from her past. After 12 years serving in the blistering sands of Iraq, her body bears the weight of unseen wounds, a shoulder that throbs on rainy nights, a lingering scar from a 2015 roadside bomb that nearly claimed her life. But it's her mind that wages the fiercest battle, haunted by memories she can't outrun, echoes of gunfire and screams that jolt her awake in the dead of night. For 5 months, she's navigated the city's labyrinth of streets, finding a fragile solace in the hum of her Hyundai Elantra and the fleeting stories strangers share during her rides. Detroit, her childhood home, weaves a tapestry of bittersweet memories. Daughter of a hard-working mechanic and a compassionate nurse, she enlisted at 19, craving purpose in a world that felt too small. Now, at 1 a.m. on a bone-chilling Saturday, she accepts a ride request near a dive bar on the east side, unaware that danger lurks in the back seat, ready to unravel her carefully rebuilt life. At Daily Narrated Stories, we bring you tales that grip your heart and stir your soul. Stay with us as Samantha's journey unfolds. Samantha's breath caught in her throat as she glanced in the rearview mirror, her Marine training snapping into focus like a well-oiled rifle locking into place. The man in the back seat, his face half hidden beneath a worn jacket's hood, dipped his hand into his pocket, revealing the dull glint of a pistol, its barrel catching the faint glow of a passing streetlight. "Pull over, somewhere quiet. I just want your cash and phone," he growled, his voice a low rasp that sent a shiver racing down her spine. Her mind raced, assessing the situation with the precision of a battlefield strategist. Tight space, armed threat, no immediate escape. She'd faced worse in Iraq. Insurgent ambushes, IED blasts that left her ears ringing for days. The acrid smell of burning metal seared into her memory. But this was different. No squad, no backup, just her and the wheel of her Hyundai Elantra, the engine humming softly beneath her trembling hands. The alley she turned into was cloaked in darkness. The only sound the crunch of gravel under her tires and the faint drip of a leaking pipe echoing off the brick walls, each drop a heartbeat in the tense silence. "Okay, I'll cooperate," she said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins, a wildfire threatening to consume her calm. She steered into the shadowed alley, her headlights cutting through the gloom, and parked near a rusted dumpster that reeked of stale beer and decay, the stench curling into the car like an unwelcome guest. A street lamp flickered above, casting an eerie, stuttering glow on the man's face, and a jolt of recognition hit Samantha like a punch to the gut, stealing the breath from her lungs. Those eyes, sunken, bloodshot, but unmistakable, like a ghost staring back from a forgotten battlefield. "Jenkins. Marcus Jenkins," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the pounding of her own heart, a drumbeat echoing the chaos of her past. The man froze, his gun hand trembling as if the weapon suddenly weighed 1,000 pounds, the barrel dipping toward the floor of the car. "How do you know me?" he stammered, his voice cracking with a mix of fear and confusion, his eyes darting as if searching for an escape. "Lance Corporal Jenkins, 1st Battalion, 3rd Marines. I'm Sergeant Carter," she said, her tone steady but laced with a tremor of disbelief. His bloodshot eyes widened, the gun wavering in his grip, his knuckles whitening as he struggled to process her words. "Sergeant C. I didn't know it was you," he murmured, his words slurring slightly, as if the weight of the realization had knocked the air out of him, leaving him gasping in the wake of their shared history. The silence that followed was suffocating, laden with unspoken memories that hung between them like a thick fog rolling over a battlefield at dawn. Marcus had been a rising star under her command. Sharp, loyal, The kind of soldier you'd trust with your life in the chaos of Fallujah, where every shadow hid a threat. She could still picture him, his uniform crisp, his grin wide as he cracked a joke during a rare moment of downtime. The desert sun beating down on their outpost, the air shimmering with heat. He'd shared a story about his childhood dog, a scrappy mutt named Rusty, his laughter bright and unburdened, a beacon of hope amidst the endless grind of war. Now he was a shell of that man, his frame gaunt, his arms marked with scars that told a story of addiction, needle tracks that crisscrossed his skin like a map of despair, each mark a testament to the battles he'd fought and lost in the years since. His once steady hands, the ones that could assemble a rifle blindfolded, now shook uncontrollably, the gun slipping slightly in his grip, a physical manifestation of the chaos within. "We need to talk," Samantha said, her voice steady but warm, a tone she'd used countless times to calm a rattled soldier under fire, to bring order to the chaos of combat. Marcus hesitated, his gaze darting to the alley entrance as if he might bolt, his body tense like a coiled spring, then lowered the gun, his shoulders slumping in defeat, the fight draining out of him like water through a sieve. I didn't mean for this, Sergeant," he whispered, his voice breaking, a sob catching in his throat. She nodded toward a 24-hour diner a few blocks away, its neon sign flickering in the distance like a lighthouse in a storm. "Let's get coffee." No judgment, just coffee. As they drove, the city's streets stretched out before them, a maze of flickering streetlights and shadowed corners, the glow of neon signs casting an otherworldly light on the cracked pavement. Samantha's mind churned, a storm of thoughts and memories swirling like a sandstorm in the Iraqi desert, blinding and relentless. How many Marcus Jenkinses were out there, veterans lost to the shadows of civilian life, abandoned by a system that promised to care? She thought of her own struggles, the nights where sleep wouldn't come, where the sound of a car backfiring sent her diving for cover behind her couch, her heart racing as if she were back in a war zone, the taste of dust and fear on her tongue. She'd wake up drenched in sweat, the phantom smell of gunpowder in her nose, her hands reaching for a rifle that wasn't there, her fingers grasping at empty air. It had taken months of therapy, countless sessions with a VA counselor who refused to let her give up, to pull her back from the edge, to teach her how to breathe again. But Marcus, he'd had no one, no safety net to catch him when he fell, no hand to pull him from the abyss. The diner was a relic of better days, its checkered floors scuffed and faded, the air thick with the scent of burnt coffee and greasy bacon, a comforting warmth that contrasted with the chill outside. Marcus sat in the farthest booth, his back to the wall, his eyes darting like a cornered animal scanning for threats, his fingers twitching against the table. Samantha set a steaming cup before him, the ceramic mug warm against her palms, the faint aroma of coffee a grounding force in the tense moment. "Still take it black with a splash of cream?" she asked, her voice soft, almost tender, a lifeline thrown across the years that separated them. His gaze softened, a flicker of the old Marcus surfacing, like a ghost emerging from the fog, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "You remember that?" he asked, a faint smile tugging at his lips, though it quickly faded, swallowed by the shadows in his eyes. She nodded, her own smile faint but genuine, a small bridge between their past and present. A good leader knows her team, habits, strengths, weaknesses. He sipped the coffee, his hands shaking so violently that the liquid sloshed over the rim, a few drops staining the table, dark against the faded formica. "When did you get back?" she asked, her tone gentle but probing, a careful step into the minefield of his past. 3 years ago, he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper, his eyes fixed on the cup as if it held the answers to questions he couldn't face. "After that IED in Fallujah. Took shrapnel in my leg." Samantha's mind flashed back to that mission, a chaotic ambush in the narrow streets of Fallujah, the air thick with dust and the screams of the wounded, the crackle of gunfire a relentless assault on her senses. Marcus had been on point, his voice steady as he called out enemy positions, even as an explosion rocked their convoy, the force of it throwing Samantha to the ground, her ears ringing with a high-pitched whine. She could still hear the shouts of her squad as they scrambled for cover, the smell of burning rubber and blood heavy in the air. Marcus had dragged a wounded corporal to safety, his own leg bleeding from shrapnel, his face set in grim determination, sweat and dirt streaking his cheeks. "Did you get help when you returned?" she asked, pulling herself back to the present, her voice a lifeline to the man sitting across from her. He scoffed, a bitter edge to his voice that cut like a knife, sharp and unyielding. "The usual. A few VA appointments, some pills, a thank you for your service." Then the nightmare started. Pills ran out. I found other ways. His eyes dropped to the table, shame etched into every line of his face, his shoulders hunching as if he could make himself smaller, invisible. Samantha's heart ached, a deep, visceral pain that spread through her chest like wildfire, burning away the distance between them. She'd been there, teetering on the edge of that same abyss, the lure of oblivion whispering in her ear during her darkest nights, a seductive promise of escape. She remembered the first time she'd considered taking an extra pill, the bottle of painkillers sitting on her nightstand like a siren calling her to ruin. Its label faded from how often she'd held it. It had been her sister, Emily, who'd saved her, showing up unannounced one night after Samantha had missed a family dinner, her eyes full of worry, her voice trembling as she spoke. "You're not okay, Sam," Emily had said, her voice breaking. "And I'm not leaving until you are." That night, Emily had stayed, holding Samantha as she cried for the first time since leaving the Marines, the tears a release of years of pent-up grief, a flood that washed away the numbness. But Marcus had no one. His brother had died in Afghanistan, a roadside bomb that left nothing to bury, and his father had been lost to his own vices long before Marcus ever enlisted, a shadow of a man who couldn't face his own demons, let alone his sons. "Where are you staying?" she asked, her voice soft but insistent, a lifeline thrown into the darkness. "Around," he mumbled, his gaze fixed on the coffee cup, his fingers tracing the rim as if it were a tether to reality. "That's not a home, Jenkins," she said, her tone firm but not unkind, a gentle push against the walls he'd built around himself. He glared at her, his voice cracking with raw emotion, a dam breaking under the weight of his pain. "What do you suggest? That I just forget everything and start over? Look at me. I'm not that Marine anymore." Samantha met his gaze, her own eyes steady despite the storm of emotions swirling within her, a tempest of grief and determination. "Neither am I the same sergeant," she replied, her voice quiet but resolute, a promise carved in stone. "But we're still fighting, aren't we? Different battles, same war." She thought of the nights she'd spent staring at the ceiling, the weight of her own guilt pressing down on her like a lead blanket. Guilt for the soldiers she couldn't save, for the missions that went wrong, for the pieces of herself she'd left behind in the desert, scattered like ash on the wind. She'd learned to channel that pain into purpose, driving for Lyft to keep her hands busy, her mind occupied, the hum of the engine a soothing rhythm against the chaos in her head. But Marcus, he'd been consumed by it, the darkness swallowing him whole, a black hole that left nothing in its wake. That night, Samantha brought Marcus to her modest apartment, a small one-bedroom on the edge of the city, its walls lined with faded photos of her family and a few mementos from her Marine days, a folded flag in a wooden case, a medal glinting in a glass frame, a photo of her squad in better times, their smiles frozen in a moment of camaraderie. She gave him the couch, a clean shirt that smelled faintly of laundry detergent, the fabric soft against her fingers, and a promise to talk more at dawn, a fragile hope in the darkness. Alone in her room, she sat on the edge of her bed, a worn journal in hand, the pages filled with her jagged handwriting, a testament to the battles she'd fought within herself. Her pen trembled as she wrote, the words spilling out like blood from a wound. I hear his groans through the door, withdrawal tearing him apart like a wild animal caught in a trap. It's like the cries in Iraq, the ones I couldn't save, echoing through the years, a chorus of pain I can't silence. Am I strong enough to help him when I'm still fighting my own ghosts? The memory of a mission flashed in her mind. A dusty patrol in Ramadi, Marcus laughing over MREs, his optimism infectious as he shared a story about his childhood dog, Rusty, a scrappy mutt who'd once stolen a neighbor's steak off the grill. She could still hear his laugh, bright and unburdened, a stark contrast to the broken man on her couch, his groans a haunting reminder of how far he'd fallen. Seeing him now, so shattered, made her chest tighten with a mix of fear and resolve, a fierce determination to pull him back from the brink, to save the man she'd once known. Morning came, gray and heavy with the promise of rain, and Marcus looked like death warmed over, pale as a ghost, sweat beading on his forehead, his eyes hollow and sunken, the shadows beneath them dark as bruises. "I need to go," he rasped, staggering to his feet, his movements jerky and unsteady, his body trembling with the effort. "I've got things to do." Samantha placed a plate of toast and eggs on the table, the smell of butter and warmth filling the small space, a small act of care in the midst of chaos. "Your only job today is to eat," she said, her voice calm but firm, a steady anchor in the storm of his withdrawal. "Then we'll figure out what's next." He sneered, his frustration boiling over, a volcano erupting after years of dormancy, and knocked the plate to the floor with a trembling hand. "There is no next for me, Sergeant. I'm a failure, a junkie who tried to rob the only person who ever believed in me." The toast hit the linoleum with a soft thud, crumbs scattering like shattered hopes, the eggs pooling in a sad, yellow mess, a mirror to the mess of his life. Samantha stayed calm, her training keeping her grounded even as her heart broke for him, a fracture that ran deep. "How did you feel before you recognized me?" she asked, her voice gentle but probing, cutting through his anger like a knife through butter, seeking the truth beneath the rage. He paused, his shoulders slumping, his voice barely a whisper, a confession wrung from the depths of his soul. "Desperate, sick, terrified. And now," she pressed, stepping closer, her eyes searching his, a lifeline in the darkness. "Still desperate, but ashamed, because you see me like this." She shook her head, her voice steady, a beacon of hope in the storm. "Not shame, Jenkins. Responsibility for what you've done and what you'll do next." From that day, Samantha set a strict routine, her military discipline kicking in like a drill sergeant on a mission, a structure to rebuild what had been broken. Marcus would stay with her, no drugs, no excuses, no exceptions. She'd drive her Lyft shifts, the city's streets a blur of neon and concrete, the glow of streetlights reflecting off the windshield like stars in a polluted sky. But in between, she'd help him rebuild, step by grueling step, a journey through the fire. The first weeks were hell, a relentless battle against the demons clawing at Marcus from the inside out, a war fought in the confines of her small apartment. His withdrawal brought rage, then despair, his body racked with tremors and nausea that left him curled on the bathroom floor, retching until there was nothing left, the sound echoing through the thin walls like a cry for help. He'd scream at her, his voice raw with pain, begging for a fix to make the agony stop, his words a desperate plea that tore at her heart. "Just one hit, Sarge, please. I can't do this," he'd sob, his nails digging into his arms, leaving angry red welts, his body shaking as if it might shatter. Other times, he'd turn inward, his silence more terrifying than his outbursts, his eyes vacant as he stared at the wall, lost in memories of Fallujah, the explosions, the blood, the friends he couldn't save, their faces haunting him like ghosts in the night. One night, she found him at the door, trembling, a stolen kitchen knife in his hand, the blade glinting in the dim light of the hallway, a desperate edge to his movements. "I can't do this," he sobbed, tears streaming down his face, his voice breaking with despair, a man on the edge of the abyss. She blocked his path, her body a barrier between him and the darkness outside, her voice firm but laced with compassion, a lifeline thrown into the storm. "You're stronger than you think, Jenkins. I've seen it." Flashbacks of their time in Iraq played in her mind. A dusty patrol in the outskirts of Fallujah, Marcus shielding her from gunfire, his courage unshakable as bullets whizzed past them, the air thick with the smell of cordite and fear. She could still feel the heat of the desert sun on her skin, the weight of her gear digging into her shoulders, the sound of Marcus's steady voice calling out orders over the chaos, a rock in the storm. That Marine was still in there, buried beneath the pain, a flicker of light in the darkness, and she'd be damned if she let him slip away. Samantha's own struggles mirrored his in ways she hadn't expected, a reflection in a cracked mirror that showed her own scars. Every night, as Marcus battled his demons on the couch, she'd retreat to her room, the weight of her own past pressing down on her like a lead blanket, a suffocating presence she couldn't escape. She'd light a candle, the flickering flame casting shadows on the walls, a dance of light and dark that mirrored the turmoil in her mind, and sit with her journal, pouring her fears onto the page, the ink a release for the pain she couldn't voice. "I see myself in him," she wrote one night, her handwriting shaky, the pen trembling in her grip. "The nights I wanted to give up, to drown the pain in a bottle of pills or whiskey, the darkness whispering that it would be easier to let go. What if I'd had no one to pull me back? Would I be where he is now, lost in the shadows?" She thought of her sister, Emily, who'd shown up at her door one night after Samantha had missed a family dinner, her eyes full of worry, her voice trembling with love. "You're not okay, Sam," Emily had said, her voice breaking like glass. "And I'm not leaving until you are." That night, Emily had stayed, holding Samantha as she cried for the first time since leaving the Marines, the tears a release of years of pent-up grief, a flood that washed away the numbness, leaving her raw but alive. It was that love, that unwavering support, that had saved her, a lifeline in the storm. Now, she had to be that for Marcus, a rock to cling to in the raging sea of his addiction. Weeks turned into months, and slowly, painfully, Marcus began to show signs of progress, small victories in a war that seemed endless. The tremors lessened, his outbursts grew less frequent, and there were moments, fleeting, fragile moments, where the old Marcus would shine through, a glimpse of the man he'd been. One morning, as Samantha brewed coffee, the rich aroma filling the apartment, he sat at the table, his hands steady for the first time in weeks, and managed a small smile, a crack of light in the darkness. "Thanks, Sarge," he said, his voice hoarse but genuine, a whisper of gratitude that warmed her heart. "For not giving up." She nodded, her throat tight with emotion, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Never will, Jenkins," she replied, her voice a promise, a vow etched in the air between them. But the road was far from smooth, a winding path through a minefield of setbacks. There were days where Marcus would withdraw into himself, the weight of his guilt and shame pulling him under like a riptide, his eyes distant as he sat on the couch, clutching a photo of his brother, the only family he'd had left. Samantha would sit with him during those moments, her presence a quiet anchor, her hand resting on his shoulder, a silent reminder that he wasn't alone, that she would stand by him through the storm. One evening, as Samantha waited for a ride request, her phone pinged with a notification that made her stomach drop like a stone, a cold dread settling in her bones. The name on the app was Daniel Harper, a name that sent a chill down her spine, a ghost from her past she'd hoped to never face again. Harper had been their battalion captain, a man of iron will and unyielding ambition, now a wealthy CEO of Harper Defense Solutions, lauded in the media as a veteran success story, his face on magazine covers, his name synonymous with power. His company had secured multi-million-dollar contracts with the government, his empire built on the backs of those he'd left behind. Samantha hesitated, her thumb hovering over the accept button, her heart pounding in her chest, but curiosity overrode her unease, a need to know why Harper, of all people, had requested her. She accepted the ride, her hands trembling as she drove to the pickup spot, a sleek office tower downtown, its glass facade reflecting the city lights like a mirror, a cold, unfeeling monument to Harper's success. Harper was waiting at the entrance, his suit crisp and tailored, his posture still commanding, as if he were about to lead a briefing in a war room, his presence a reminder of the power he wielded. "Sergeant Carter," he greeted, sliding into the back seat with the ease of a man who knew he was in control, his voice smooth but laced with an edge of menace. "Or just Samantha now, I suppose." She forced a smile, her hands tightening on the wheel, her knuckles whitening as she fought to keep her composure. "How did you know I was driving?" she asked, her voice steady despite the unease creeping up her spine, a cold tendril wrapping around her heart. He smirked, a cold, calculating smile that didn't reach his eyes, a predator sizing up its prey. "I have my ways," he said, his tone smooth but laced with an edge of menace, a warning hidden in the words. The air in the car grew heavy, the tension thick enough to choke on, a palpable force that pressed against her chest. "We need to discuss Marcus Jenkins," he continued, his voice dropping, each word a carefully placed strike. "My company tracks veterans with potential. Jenkins was on our radar until his drug issues spiraled out of control. I hear you've reconnected." Samantha's grip on the wheel tightened, her knuckles whitening as she fought to keep her composure, her anger simmering just beneath the surface, a volcano ready to erupt. "With respect, Marcus's life isn't your concern," she said, her voice low but firm, a challenge in the face of his arrogance. Harper's tone hardened, his words cutting like a blade, sharp and unyielding. "When it involves classified operations, it is. Jenkins knows things, sensitive things from our time in Fallujah. In his state, he's a liability. He's recovering," she shot back, her anger flaring, a fire in her chest that refused to be extinguished. Harper sighed, his voice dripping with condescension, each word a calculated jab designed to wound. "That's what they all say before they relapse. I'm offering help, a discreet rehab program my company runs, away from the city's temptations." Samantha's jaw clenched, her mind racing, a storm of thoughts and fears swirling within her. "Sounds more like a cage than recovery," she said, her tone sharp, a defiance that echoed her refusal to bend. Harper chuckled coldly, the sound sending a shiver down her spine, a predator's laugh that promised danger. "Call it what you want. It's a solution to the Jenkins problem." The words hit her like a slap, igniting a fire in her chest, a rage that burned brighter than her fear. "He's not a problem. He's a Marine we left behind," she snapped, her voice trembling with barely restrained fury, her hands shaking on the wheel. Harper's eyes narrowed, his smirk fading, a flicker of annoyance crossing his face. "Still the bleeding heart, Carter. That's why you never rose higher." The insult stung, a dagger to her pride, but she refused to let him see her flinch, her resolve a shield against his barbs. "Some of us care about people, not promotions," she replied, her voice steady despite the anger burning in her chest, a fire that refused to be doused. She pulled over abruptly, her tires screeching against the pavement, a sharp protest in the quiet night. "This ride's over, sir." Harper studied her for a moment, his gaze cold and unyielding, a predator assessing its next move, then smiled. A smile that didn't reach his eyes, a chilling promise of retribution. "Tell Jenkins my offer stands. 3 days, or I'll ensure he's no longer a risk." The threat lingered in the air like a storm cloud, dark and ominous, as Samantha raced home, her mind a whirlwind of fear and determination, her heart pounding with the urgency of the moment. She burst through the door of her apartment, her heart sinking as she found it empty, the silence deafening, a void that echoed her growing panic. A note on the table caught her eye, written in Marcus's shaky handwriting, the paper creased and smudged with sweat. "Sarge, an old buddy called. Harper's looking for me. I can't drag you into this. Thanks for everything. Jenkins." Panic clawed at her chest, her breath coming in short, ragged gasps as she realized what this meant, the weight of the situation crashing down on her like a tidal wave. Marcus was out there, alone and vulnerable, with Harper closing in like a predator stalking its prey, a hunter with no mercy. She grabbed her keys, her hands trembling, her fingers fumbling with the metal, and set out into the night, determined to find him before it was too late, her resolve a fire that burned brighter than her fear. She searched for hours, driving through the city's darkest corners, her mind replaying every conversation she'd had with Marcus, every hint of where he might go, her heart pounding with every dead end. She checked abandoned lots, their shadows hiding secrets she couldn't uncover, seedy bars with flickering neon signs that promised oblivion, and alleyways where the air was thick with the stench of garbage and despair, each location a dead end that fueled her desperation. Finally, she found him in a desolate alley by the waterfront, curled against a graffiti-covered wall, shivering but sober, his breath visible in the cold night air, a faint cloud of hope in the darkness. "You shouldn't be here," he muttered, his voice weak as he looked up at her, his eyes glassy with exhaustion, his face pale and drawn. "Neither should you," she replied, sitting beside him on the icy concrete, the chills seeping through her jeans, a stark contrast to the warmth of her determination. "Why'd you run?" He exhaled shakily, his breath a cloud in the frigid air, a ghostly reminder of his fragility. "To protect you." Harper's dangerous. He doesn't mess around. What does he want with you? She asked, her voice steady but urgent, a need to understand the threat they faced. Marcus's voice dropped to a whisper, his words heavy with the weight of a truth he'd carried for years, a burden that threatened to crush him. Our last mission in Fallujah, the target wasn't an insurgent. He was a U.S. asset, a whistleblower who knew too much. Harper knew. He set us up. It was a sanctioned hit, covered up as a mistake. Samantha's blood ran cold, the revelation hitting her like a freight train, a truth that shattered the fragile illusion of honor she'd clung to. "How do you know?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, her heart pounding in her chest. "I heard him talking to a CIA operative after I got hit," Marcus said, his voice trembling, his hands shaking as he spoke. "I was bleeding out, but conscious. They thought I was out cold, delirious from the painkillers. They didn't know I heard everything." "Why didn't you report it?" she asked, her mind reeling, the pieces of the puzzle clicking into place with terrifying clarity. He laughed bitterly, the sound hollow and broken, a reflection of the man he'd become. Who'd believe me? A broken vet with a rap sheet, over a decorated hero turned CEO? Samantha's mind raced, the pieces of the puzzle clicking into place with terrifying clarity, a mosaic of betrayal and corruption that stretched back to their days in Fallujah. Harper had power, connections, resources she couldn't match, but she had something he didn't: her network of veterans, a brotherhood forged in the crucible of war, a bond that no amount of money or power could break. "We need proof, Marcus," she said, her voice firm with resolve, a determination that burned brighter than her fear. "Anything to back your story." He shook his head, his expression defeated, his eyes dull with the weight of his past. "Just my word. That's enough to start," she replied, her determination unyielding, a fire that refused to be extinguished. Over the next week, she rallied her old unit, calling in every favor she had, her voice a rallying cry that echoed through the years. A tech-savvy vet named Rodriguez, who'd served as their comms specialist, pulled encrypted mission logs from a secure server, his fingers flying over the keyboard as he muttered about backdoors and firewalls, his brow furrowed with concentration. A medic named Lopez, who'd been on that fateful mission, confirmed inconsistencies in the official reports, discrepancies in the timeline, the target's identity, even the after-action report Harper had signed off on, her voice steady as she recounted the chaos of that day. Slowly, painstakingly, the evidence began to mount, each piece a small victory in their fight for the truth, a step closer to justice. But as the evidence grew, so did the danger, a shadow that loomed larger with each passing day. One night, as Marcus sat on Samantha's couch, a shadow passed by the window. A man in a dark hoodie, his face obscured, lingered just long enough to send a chill down Marcus's spine, a silent threat that spoke louder than words. The next day, a man approached him while Samantha was on a Lyft shift, his voice smooth and persuasive as he offered a deal from Harper. Cash and a baggie of pills, the white powder glinting in the dim light of the alley, a temptation that called to the darkest parts of Marcus's soul. The temptation was palpable, a siren song that whispered promises of relief, of escape from the pain that gnawed at him. His hands shook as he held the drugs, the familiar pull tearing at him like a starving beast, his mouth dry with longing, his heart pounding with the battle raging within. A tense beat passed, the alley silent except for his ragged breaths, the city's hum a distant roar, a world that felt so far away. Then, with a guttural cry, he threw the pills into a nearby dumpster, the plastic baggie hitting the metal with a dull thud, a rejection of the darkness that had nearly consumed him. "Why didn't you take it?" Samantha asked later, her voice soft as they sat in her kitchen, the clock ticking softly on the wall, a steady rhythm in the quiet night. Tears welled in his eyes, his voice choked with emotion, a confession of the strength she'd given him. "Because you believed in me when no one else did. I can't let you down again." Harper, feeling the pressure of their investigation, escalated his tactics, a predator cornered and ready to strike. Samantha returned home one night after a long shift, her body aching from hours behind the wheel, her eyes heavy with exhaustion, to find her apartment trashed, furniture overturned, photos torn from the walls, her journal lying open on the floor, its pages ripped and scattered like the pieces of her life. Harper sat on her couch, his posture relaxed but his eyes cold, a smug grin on his face that made her blood boil, a rage that threatened to consume her. "You should have taken my offer, Carter," he said, his voice smooth but laced with menace, a predator toying with its prey. Her voice trembled with rage, her hands clenching into fists at her sides, her nails digging into her palms. "And you should have honored your oath to protect this country, not exploit its Marines." He scoffed, his tone dripping with disdain, a dismissal of everything she stood for. "You still believe in honor? Look at Jenkins, a junkie no one will trust. Look at you, a Lyft driver scraping by. This is what America gives its heroes." Her fists clenched tighter, her nails drawing blood, a physical manifestation of the pain in her heart. "We didn't serve for rewards," she shot back, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions raging inside her, a fire that refused to be doused. Harper stood, his tone icy, each word a calculated threat, a promise of destruction. "Last chance. Stop this investigation, get Jenkins to comply, or I'll stage an overdose. He'll be just another statistic, and no one will bat an eye." He left, the door slamming like a gunshot, the sound echoing in the empty apartment, a haunting reminder of the danger they faced. Samantha stood in the wreckage of her home, her heart pounding, her mind racing, a storm of fear and determination swirling within her. She realized this wasn't just about Marcus anymore. It was about everything Harper stood for: corruption, betrayal, the abandonment of those who'd sacrificed everything for their country, a betrayal of the oath they'd all sworn. She sank to the floor, her hands trembling as she picked up a torn photo of her squad. Marcus's young, smiling face staring back at her from better days, a time when hope had still felt possible. She clutched the photo to her chest, tears streaming down her face as she whispered, a vow to herself and to him. "I won't let him win." The next day, she and Marcus attended a veterans gathering at a local community center, the room filled with the quiet hum of shared stories and the clink of coffee mugs, a sanctuary for those who'd seen too much. They stood together, sharing their story, every raw, painful detail, their voices a testament to the truth they'd uncovered. Marcus's voice shook as he spoke, his hands clasped tightly in front of him, his eyes glistening with the weight of his words. "I know I've lost your trust. I'm a recovering addict, a mess. But I'm also a Marine who swore to protect this nation, and I'm trying to keep that promise." The room fell silent, the weight of his words hanging in the air, a heavy truth that demanded to be heard. An elderly vet, a Korean War survivor with a weathered face and a chest full of medals, stood slowly, his voice trembling with emotion, a voice that carried the weight of decades. "I was silenced in '53 when I spoke the truth. I won't let it happen again." One by one, others rose, sharing their own tales of military cover-ups, of orders they'd questioned, of comrades left behind, their voices a chorus of defiance. A movement was born, a tidal wave of voices that refused to be silenced, a reckoning that could not be stopped. Harper retaliated with the ruthlessness of a man who knew his empire was crumbling, a desperate act to cling to power. Using his influence, he had Marcus arrested on false drug charges, the handcuffs snapping around his wrists as Samantha watched helplessly, her heart breaking as he was led away, his eyes meeting hers with a look of fear and resignation. But she refused to stand idle, her resolve a fire that burned brighter than her despair. She mobilized their veteran network, her voice a rallying cry that echoed through phone calls and group chats, a call to arms for those who'd fought beside her. Within hours, dozens gathered outside the precinct, some in faded uniforms, others in wheelchairs, a united front that stood tall despite the cold night air, their faces set with determination. Their chant, "We leave no one behind," echoed through the streets, a battle cry amplified by social media as videos of their protest went viral, hashtags trending across the country, a movement that refused to be ignored. The pressure forced an independent investigation, the truth finally coming to light, a beacon in the darkness. Witnesses emerged, documents were leaked, exposing Harper's corrupt dealings, contracts secured through bribes, operations covered up to protect his reputation, and a trail of broken veterans left in his wake, their lives discarded like collateral damage. His empire crumbled under the weight of the scandal. He was indicted for fraud, conspiracy, and obstruction, his name dragged through the mud as the nation watched, a fall from grace that echoed the justice they'd fought for. Marcus was released, stepping out of the precinct into the crisp night air, the stars above a silent witness to his freedom. He found Samantha and their veteran allies waiting, their faces a mix of relief and pride, their presence a testament to the bond they shared. "How do you feel?" she asked, her voice thick with emotion, her eyes glistening with tears of relief. "Like a Marine again," he replied, a faint smile breaking through the exhaustion on his face, a glimmer of the man he'd once been. Not a hero, just a man doing his duty. In the months that followed, their story sparked a national reckoning, a ripple that turned into a wave of change. New laws were proposed to address veteran trauma and addiction, a testament to their fight, a legacy of their resilience. Samantha kept driving for Lyft, the hum of the engine a familiar comfort, but she poured her heart into a new veteran support group, a sanctuary for those who'd been left behind. Marcus, now a coordinator for the group, became a beacon of hope, his recovery a daily battle but a powerful testimony of what resilience could achieve, a light for others to follow. One crisp fall evening, they sat on a park bench, the air cool and tinged with the scent of fallen leaves, watching new group members laugh during a community event, their voices a melody of healing. Marcus's voice was soft, a whisper of reflection in the quiet moment. "What scared me most wasn't the drugs or Harper. It was how close I came to losing myself that night." Samantha shook her head, her hand resting on his, a gesture of solidarity. "You didn't. Not because of me, but because of the Marine you've always been, even when you couldn't see it." He glanced at the veterans, some scarred visibly, others invisibly, their laughter a testament to the progress they'd made. "Are we making a difference?" She watched a young vet smile, a lightness in his eyes she hadn't seen before, a spark of hope in the darkness. "We may not change the world," she said, her voice steady, "but we're changing their worlds, one Marine at a time." This story is a reminder that redemption lies in the courage to reach out, to fight for those left behind, to hold on to the bonds that war forges and peace cannot break. What does leaving no one behind mean to you? Share your thoughts or a story of resilience in the comments. We'd love to hear from you, to connect through the power of shared experiences. At Daily Narrated Stories, we bring you tales that inspire, heal, and uplift, shining a light on the human spirit's unbreakable strength, stories that remind us of the heroes among us. The sun dipped low, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson, a new dawn for those who'd walked through darkness, a promise of hope after the storm. Some heroes drive cabs at midnight, some demons follow them home, whispering in the shadows. But salvation waits at the crossroads, where broken souls mend, where the past meets the future in a moment of grace. Sometimes it's a hand extended, a voice that whispers, "I won't leave you behind." Not all wounds heal, not all wars end, but honor lives in how we rise, in the choices we make when the world turns away. Don't miss your chance to be part of this journey. Subscribe to Daily Narrated Stories now and help us reach 1,000 subscribers this week, a milestone that will allow us to share more stories of courage and redemption. Your support ensures more stories like Samantha and Marcus's reach those who need them most, those who find solace in the tales we tell. Act now. Hit that button, comment, and share, because